We're talking about family again. Bleach family. So this is the Sisters Day Bleach video, where I go through and talk about all the different sisters that are in Bleach. Some of these I will have touched on a little bit because I talked about some of the different brothers that are in Bleach, but there's a few here that I haven't really been able to mention because there's no brothers involved in this relationship. So we're going to include some of those as well. There's actually not as many as there are for like the brothers one, I believe, but there's still a decent amount to go over. So at the top of the list, we have Karin and Yuzu, Kurosaki, I was going to say Kurotsuchi. Wrong. Kurosaki. And they're, of course, the younger sisters, the younger twin sisters to Ichigo. Throughout the course of the story, they do play some decent amounts of roles in it, generally being put in danger. We know that Karin has the ability to see spirits the same way that Ichigo does, and even though Yuzu cannot see them, she still seems to be able to at least slightly sense them a little bit. And she, of course, believes, her sister and her brother and the fact that they can see and interact with spirits, and she is very polite to the spirits when she does interact with them. We get a bit more of that in the filler than we do in the actual anime, but I still kind of like that because it's filler that makes sense, and we get the same thing with like Karin interacting with spirits as well. We know that both of the girls were very young when their mother died, when Masaki died, and that it definitely hurt them just the way that it hurt Ichigo and Isshin. And we know that Yuzu kind of more became kind of like the mother figure, where she started taking care of a lot more when it came to the cooking and cleaning and things like that. Not that Ichigo and Isshin and Karin don't help with those things, but Yuzu was the main one that took care of that stuff. And then of course we know that Karin is very much into soccer and very much is more of the tomboy, while Yuzu is a little bit more of the girly girl. We also know that Yuzu tends to take quite a bit after their dad, in regards to just being very overly emotional at times. And Karin tends to be a little bit more stoic, kind of the way that Ichigo is. And we know that after the time skip, after, Ichigo loses his powers, and then when we cut back like 18 months later, we know that Karin is trying to, she's buying supplies from Uehara that she can then use to try to, kind of scare away or run off spirits, so that way they don't bother her family so much, because she kind of knows that Ichigo can't really see spirits anymore, so she's like, well, I'm going to take this upon myself. I know that there were a lot of people, myself included, when I kind of learned about these theories, that like, oh, Karin can learn to become a Soul Reaper, and then Yuzu can learn to become a Quincy, and then that way it's this thing of like, Yuzu and Karin being kind of a similar representation to the way that Ichigo and Uryu are, of these two, opposing sides to a degree, learning how to work together because they don't have that animosity toward each other. And I think if they wanted to try to pull that off later or do something with it later, that would be an interesting way of doing it. We also know that the impetus for Ichigo becoming a Soul Reaper to begin with, where he takes Rukia's power, is because he wants to protect his sisters because the Hollow is attacking, and he's like, well, I have to protect my sisters, and that's why he takes Rukia's power. And then he uses that, and then eventually he, of course, later on down the line, awakens his own power and everything. And so we get to see a lot of that. We get to see a lot of his interactions with his sisters. He loves them and is very protective of them, but he also knows that they can take care of themselves at different points in time. So we get to see that a lot. Moving on, we now have the two Kuchiki sisters. So we have Hisane and Rukia. And while we learn much later on, or learn near the end of the Soul Society arc, that Hisane and Rukia, that we learned from Byakuya telling Rukia, and I'll get into Rukia and Byakuya's relationship in a moment, but Um, we find out the past for Rukia and Hisane, and Rukia had simply just believed that Hisane just looked so much like her, that she looked a lot like Hisane, and that was one of the reasons why Byakuya may have wanted to adopt her into the Kuchiki family. I mean, that is kind of a reason, but it's not the entire reason. We find out that Hisane and Rukia are biological sisters, as in they were like sisters before they died. Probably during some 150 years ago, some famine or disease outbreak in Japan or wherever, and they both died. And Rukia was a baby when this happened, and Hisane tries to do at least what she can to try to provide for Rukia, but given the way that things were in the Soul Society and the fact that they were way out in the very, high numbers of the Rukon districts where they were much more lawless and had a lot less, materials that they could work with, Hisane unfortunately ended up abandoning Rukia. Unfortunately, this of course leads to Rukia being, end up in like the orphanage and, meeting Renji and their friends and everything, which is a good thing because then she meets Renji. But we know that later on Hisane ends up somehow, I think she ends up working for the Kuchiki family, and then Byakuya ends up falling in love with her, so we kind of get like a little bit of a love story there between the two of them. And Byakuya clearly just adores Hisane through the little bits that we get to see in the flashbacks. And I know that in one of the movies, I think it's the one where everybody forgets Rukia, the Fade to Black or whatever it's called, that one, where, he remembers Hisane. And of course he remembers Hisane, but he's also like, he remembers she kept looking for someone. And that eventually kind of helps with, him remembering Rukia and Ichigo and everything. But, and we get some of like additional things there that are, it's like, okay, that is technically filler because the movies are not technically canon, but, you get some of that additional information there, and it's kind of interesting to see the way that the characters would have played out on that. We know that once Hisane was more stable within the Kuchiki clan, when she had married Byakuya, she's like, okay, I need to find my sister. And she tries to find Rukia by searching through the Rukon districts, the district that they were from. And she can't find Rukia, and eventually Hisane, several years after marrying Byakuya, ends up dying of a sickness. We never find out what sickness it is, but she always seemed to be in rather frail health to begin with. But she ends up dying, and then, Byakuya takes up this, takes up her quest, and he's like, okay, I'm going to find her sister, and depending on her situation, I am going to bring her into our family so that way she can be safe, because, I promised Hisane that I would. And he does. He succeeds in finding Rukia. She's going to the Soul Reaper Academy at the time, and he finds her, and he's like, okay, you're going to come, and I'm going to adopt you as my sister. And that was 50 years ago. 40 years ago. Whichever. Some time range of that. 40 or 50 years before the start of the story. And, Rukia just kind of thinks it has something to do with the fact that she looks similar to Hisane, that he just feels sorry for her. And for a good chunk of the beginning of the series, and for a good chunk of the time frame that he is her adopted brother, Rukia and Byakuya don't really have that much of an affection for each other. Rukia ends up going into the 13th squad. Byakuya is, of course, the 6th division leader. And they just don't really seem to interact that much. And there's really not like this, lovey-dovey protection type of thing that Byakuya tries to show her, which isn't really in Byakuya's character to begin with, in all honesty. And of course, we find out, when we see Rukia and Byakuya interact for the first time, when Byakuya and Renji come to the world of living to get Rukia, she is very, respective of him, and even, shouts at Ichigo for not being respectful to Byakuya, because that was kind of the way that she was, she wants to be as respectful of Byakuya as she can, because technically, if he wished, he could just disown her and she'd be back to being an orphan again. She is still technically an orphan, but then she's a homeless orphan. And we know that, throughout the course of the Soul Society arc, with Ichigo just basically like pounding it into Byakuya's head, that's like, you're a big brother. It is your job to protect your younger siblings, regardless of what other people think. Regardless of what these stupid Soul Society rules say about her giving her Soul Reaper powers to a human. She is your sister. And eventually this gets through Byakuya's thick, dumbass head. And he does end up protecting Rukia, and he does end up, trying to protect her from Aizen. And then he gets to explain to her everything. It's like, Hisane was your sister, and blah, 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 blah. And then throughout the rest of the series, we actually see their relationship grow. You, of course, have the My Only Pride moment during the Wikamundo arc, where Byakuya fights against Zomori to protect Rukia and everything, where he destroys Zomori simply because he attacked Rukia. And we get that moment. And then, of course, much later on, we just have like the cute moment with them on the beach where they're both making, the giant ugly sand sculptures. And then just, later on now, currently in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, we are about to get to the point where, Rukia will use her Bankai for the first time in the next couple of episodes, I believe. And of course, she's using it to fight Asnode, who is the one who, for all intents and purposes, should have killed Byakuya, and Byakuya technically should be dead. But he's not. I like Byakuya, but I understand that given the injuries that he had and given the circumstances of what we've seen in regards to that fight, Byakuya technically should be dead. He's not, but he should be. But he comes back. He's fine. But he's very encouraging to Rukia at this point in time, and he's probably very proud of her after, the next time skip where she's, now the captain of Squad 13 and everything. And, so we get all that. Next set that we have for when it comes to sisters, and I've gone over this at length because I've talked about Orihime and Sora multiple times in the Brother's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day stuff, so not as much here. Of course, Orihime is the younger sister to Sora. We know that they were raised by their drunken father and prostitute mother, and who they just always argued and beat their children. And then when, Sora was old enough, he, left and he took Orihime with him, and he then proceeded to raise her as best he could on his own. And she adores her big brother and everything. He's the one that gave her, the hairpins and everything that become her Shun Shun Rika. And we know that he unfortunately ended up dying about, I think it's a year or so before the beginning of the story. And we know that his spirit, that his soul, that his ghost stayed behind and kind of like watched over her. And then he eventually got jealous because of her developing friendships with friends of her own and everything, and he got a little bit jealous of that. And that is, of course, what the hollows then fed on to turn him into a hollow. And then, of course, that's where, he tries to attack her, and, Ichigo and Rukia protect Orihime. And then, they're able to, she's able to figure out that it is her brother, and she is able to then help with, helping him fully pass on. So we get some of that nice stuff there. We also know that during the Fullbringer arc that, what's the one that can mess with people's memories? I don't care. But, he messes with Orihime's memories to put him in the place of her brother instead of it being her brother, which is just a effed up thing to do. But that's what his power is. I'll talk about some other Fullbringers in a little while. So that's Orihime and Sora's relationship. She probably still very much misses her brother. We see that demonstrated in the fact that she still has his picture up. And probably, over time, once Orihime and Ichigo get married, he probably, they probably have Sora's, little picture set up in there. Probably pretty close to where Masaki's picture is, since those are people that they've lost. Possibly also a few other people end up on that table as well for other people that they've lost. Next up, we have Mizuo Asano and Keigo Asano. So Keigo is one of Ichigo's friends. He's kind of like the dumbass friend that's there, but he's a very caring individual. Perverted just the way that, Cone is. They even have similar personalities at times. But his older sister, Mizuo, is the one that she very much loves her little brother and is very protective of him, but she is also kind of like this very much more tomboyish at times, and she is the one that has the crush on Ikaku, which is just adorable and everything. And there's like a lot of like more filler content that comes from that, but is extremely hilarious. And so we get a lot of that. Mizuo very much cares for her little brother and does what she can to protect him. I don't think we ever find out anything about their parents as far as I'm aware. Yeah, I will never understand that. I mean, like, if I write a story, it's just like, you're gonna know what happened to most of the parents of the different characters if they're major enough characters where you see their frickin' house. If that is information I have to work with. And, you know, so Mizuo is also very like physically strong and stuff, and she tends to, you know, put, you know, Keigo in headlocks a lot of the times and things along those lines. And she can go from being very sweet to very angry very, very quickly. So we get a bunch of that there with their relationship. It's a little bit more comedy based, but still very good. Then we have Uru, Sumu Chia, and Jinta Hanakari. So Uru and Jinta. So Uru and Jinta are, of course, pretty much revealed later to be kind of the versions of what Nemu is. Kisuke's versions of what Nemu is, and the fact that they are artificially created bodies and souls that Kisuke developed on his own. And Kisuke very much treats, you know, Uru and Jinta as his children, and Tessai is very much a part of this. I've gone over this in the Father's Day section, where they very much treat them like children, like their own children, where they can be harsh at times, but Kisuke is also very calm and caring and protective of the two of them. And Uru is, of course, actually the older of the two, and she is very much, you know, tries to focus on work while Jinta is trying to practice his baseball because Jinta, and, you know, so we get those things, and we get other instances where Uru is, you know, she's kind of more on the not serious, but like seems to be less emotional at times, and that's why a lot of people made the comparison like her and Nemu at times, which led people to the conclusion that they were probably a similar concept of like how Kisuke developed them. Although we don't know if he had to go through as much trial and error as Mayuri did, because, you know, they're not named that way. Or at least as far as I'm aware, they're not named that way. In regards to how Uru and Jinta act as brother and sister, Jinta kind of is a bit of a bully at times to Uru, and eventually this does end up like backstabbing him at times when he ends up getting like, you know, a bit, you know, when he gets scolded by Kisuke and Tessai, and probably Yoruichi at times as well. But we also see times where they're very protective of each other, because after Uru gets hurt when the Hollows attack, when the Arrancar attack, Jinta is very, very worried about her. And he then, after she's been healed and everything by Kisuke and Tessai, when she's, you know, fully recovered, he's then like taking her outside and trying to get her to smile and laugh and, you know, get back to her old self and everything, because he just wants to have her be happy again. And we have no idea what's going on with them currently, you know, as in what is going on with them like after all of the time skips happen, and what would be, you know, with, you know, when Ichigo's kids are around. We don't see them at all in that, any of that, you know, flash forward stuff, but I would assume that, you know, they're either still working at Kisuke's shop, or they have, I don't know, Jinta went on to play baseball, and Uru, I don't know what Uru wanted to do. I don't remember there being much of like what Uru had a whole lot of interest in. Next up, we have a set that I have not gotten to talk about at all here. Again, we have Isane and Kiyone Kotetsu. So Isane is the, throughout the majority of the series, she is the lieutenant of Squad 4 under Unohana, And then Kione is the co-third seat of the 13th division, along with Sentamaru. And yeah, that's Sentamaru now. I don't know, but she's the third co-seat of the 13th division throughout the majority of the series. And they are sisters. I believe Asane is technically supposed to be the older of the two. She also physically just looks older, and Asane has issues with like her height and everything, and she doesn't like that she's so tall, and she wants to be shorter and everything. And really the main kind of interaction that we get between the two of them is actually in the Bleach swimsuit, or the Bleach beach episode. Swimsuit episode is also applied there, where, you know, they're picking out swimsuits. And I love the fact that Kyoto picks out a somewhat sexy swimsuit to give to her older sister and be like, here, wear this. And so we get that moment there, and we just get the two of them, you know, having fun with each other a little bit there. Like, that's kind of the majority of the time frame that we see them interact, because we don't see them do too much else around each other that often. I don't even remember when we find out that they are actually sisters. I don't remember when that's revealed or not, but I know that, you know, we know that by the end of the series that Isane is now the captain of Squad 4, because Unohana died, of course, after she fought Kenpachi, that she is now the captain of Squad 4, and that Kione is actually her lieutenant. We also know that Kione was probably instrumental in probably doing different types of like medical treatment for Ukitake, because like she was one of the ones that was always around him all the time and probably helped with any type of medical treatment that he needed. So she probably had training in that regard. And the fact that she is the lieutenant of Squad 4, you know, currently after all the time skips, means that she has to be able to use a good number of different types of healing, keto, and different things like that. Yeah, she probably has her, Zanpakuto, and well, we know she has her Zanpakuto, but we don't know what her Shikai or Bankai are. Same thing. We don't even know what like Asane, Shikai, and Bankai do. That would be a nice thing to learn. But it will be kind of interesting. I don't know if we're going to get any additional things with them really in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc in the anime for this Core 2. We'll find out. I'm not going to expect us to, but it would be interesting if we did. Or it might be in like Core 3 if we see anything. Not sure yet. And it also just depends on if we get anything additional in any of the other, if Kubo releases any other chapters in like the Hell's, Breasts from Hell arc or whatever it's called. But I like Asane and Kione. I think they're an adorable sister pair. And then we have Kukaku Shiba to Kaion and Ganju. So throughout the, when the Ichigo and his friends arrive in the Soul Society for the first time to go to try to save Rukia, they end up meeting Kukaku Shiba. And Kukaku is a character. I love Kukaku. She's awesome. I understand why in the anime they gave her the prosthetic arm, and I think it actually looks pretty cool. And I just think Kukaku is awesome anyway. She makes fireworks and explodes things and can put her brother and most of the other characters in their place if necessary. She has a very interesting taste in housing design and the outside. And I believe she is actually the current head of the Shiba clan, because I believe it is explained that Kaion had been the oldest, and then of course everything happened with him and the Hollow and all of that. And I believe she then became the head of the family. And then of course we have Ganju, who is of course the youngest of those three siblings as far as we're aware. And while Ganju may act very high and mighty and very reckless at times, his sister will put him in his place in an instant if necessary, and I love that. And like their relationship is just kind of fun and everything. And she like sends Ganju off on different tasks. Like, yeah, you're gonna help them break into, into the Seirete area. I'm going to do what now? Okay, here's a map. Wait, I didn't have qualified. Why have I been free? And then even later, like he's sent to the human world in filler, and it's just funny seeing that. And then of course later on we have it that, during the 1,000 Year Blood War arc, he's training with the Fullbringers that died, and then of course we know that later on he is part of trying to get them to the Soul Palace. In that regard, I don't think Kukaku really does too much else, unfortunately. I wish we saw more of her. I don't know, maybe they'll work her some way into the 1,000 Year Blood War arc and, other later stuff, even if she just pops up a little bit to help with something, that would be nice. We know that she is friends with Yoruichi and Kisuke, that they have a very good relationship with each other. So that's nice. Moving on, speaking of Yoruichi, we have Yuichio Shihoen, who is Yuichi's younger brother. And Yuichi is, of course, Yoruichi is, of course, the former head of the Shihoen clan, and her brother is currently the head of the clan. We still have yet to see him in the anime. That might be near the end of Core 2, beginning of Core 3 range, when we do see him for the first time. But he adores his big sister. He wants to be around her. He's so happy that he gets to see her, but he also scolds her for the fact of, you haven't visited me in 100 years, and I want to see my sister, and you left, and now I'm the head of everything, and I don't know what to do. We do know that he's done a fair amount of training to at least be able to get a good amount of power in his Soul Reaper and his, Kido techniques and his, what is the hand-to-hand fighting? The Hakura? Whatever. The hand-to-hand fighting techniques and stuff like that. Yoruichi does care a lot about her little brother. She does love him and everything, but she also sees him as the annoying little brother at times, so we get to see some of that throughout the course of the arc. She gets very angry when he gets stabbed by Askin later on during that fight. Yoruichi gets very, very angry about that. I would like to hope that after stuff is settled down with the Quincy's and everything, that maybe Yoruichi goes back and forth a little bit more and goes and visits her brother a bit more. I know that Soul Reapers have that very, very long lifespan and everything, and that sometimes it's I haven't seen someone for 50 or 100 years. It's fine. But it's just that would still be a long time, even if you are immortal, to not see someone that you care about. And yes, I know that Yoruichi was banished to the human world, so she really couldn't go back all that easily to go and see her little brother. But hopefully, she can do that a little bit more now. Okay, I got one more set of Soul Reaper siblings, and then I've got two sets, or Soul Reaper sister setups, and then two sets of Fullbringer stuff. So first, we have the Omaida family, because they get talked about in every one of these things. Almost every one of them. I won't be talking about them in the grandparents one, but almost every one of these. So we have, for the Omaida sisters, we have Marime and Mario. Marime is the oldest. I don't remember if she's the oldest out of all of the siblings, but she's the older of the two girls. And then we have Mario, who was the one that was much more prominent in the anime up to this point in time. We saw her near the end of the first core of the 1,000 Year Blood War arc, and a little bit at the beginning of it with, Maurecchio and her being around each other, and him, trying to protect her and everything from BG9 and all of that. And so we get some of that interaction there. We got a little bit more of Omaida with Maurecchio with his siblings and some of the side content. So we don't get too much there. Just Mario is the adorable one, but Maurecchio is still very protective of all of his siblings, even if he does find some of them weird and annoying. But that is what you do. That is how it works when you have siblings. It's I find you weird and annoying, but I'd still protect you. Yeah, I would. Then we move on to the sets of Fullbringer siblings that we are aware of. So the first one is Jackie Tristan and her little brother. I've mentioned this before. Jackie's little brother and her grew up in very, very poor conditions. And of course, Jackie had the boots that she got from her father. And then of course, one day when she gets home, she finds both of her parents and her brother killed. And that's, of course, what activates her dirty boots for the first time. And then she uses that to then fight hollows and probably to a degree, mob bosses and stuff like that as well, cartel bosses and stuff. So we get that there, and that's just one of her driving forces. And then we have the last one on this list. We have Riruka, Doku Gamine, and then her sister Gina. So Riruka is the main Fullbringer, as the two out of those that seem to have Fullbringer powers. Her sister does not seem to have Fullbringer powers, or if they do, they're still, dormant as far as we're aware. But Riruka is, of course, the one that has like the dollhouse power, where she could, shrink things down and put them into a dollhouse and do other things like that with it. Very annoying power. Useful at times, but very annoying. And so we have those interactions there. We know that they do not have a very good relationship, or they did not seem to have a very good relationship, given the one little memory that we have that we saw in the flashback is Riruka and Gina, Riruka bullying Gina over a toy and then stealing it back from her, and then Gina just runs off to cry to their mother. We do not know anything beyond that. I would assume that Riruka does not really have much of a relationship with her family anymore, which is sad, but, you lock a guy up inside of your dollhouse for a long amount of time, and you think he's going to fall in love with you when you're a child, that's kind of a twisted thing to do. Admittedly, all of the, pretty much most of the, Fullbringers have pretty messed up pasts, unfortunately. Some of it out of their control, some of it very much within their control, and they were stupid and made the wrong choice. In that regard. It's like, I'm gonna lock this guy up in my dollhouse. You need therapy, child. So that's what we have for the sisters. I was trying to remember if there were any others, because there's not really any sisters among the hollows. Yeah, there's like the two little female hollows that are like Aizen's assistants, but they're not sisters. And then even among the Quincy's, there's not really any sisters. The only siblings among the Quincy's, as far as I'm aware, were Lloyd and Royd, and they're both dead anyway. And all that. And even with like the Bambi clique, they're not sisters there. There's not really any other ones. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. The next one on this setup, I believe, should be Grandparents' Day, is what I believe it is, because there wasn't really anything I could talk about for Aunts and Uncles' Day that I hadn't already gone over in another video. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.